Welcome to Security Heroes, a podcast by Athena Security. We share real-life stories to help connect you to real heroes in the security world. I am your host, Lisa Falzone. Warning, the following recording contains potentially disturbing content. Listener discretion advised. Welcome to Security Heroes. Joining us today is Travis Forrester, Director of Security Assessments at ArmoredOne. Travis, thank you so much for coming to chat with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. Always willing to talk about this much needed topic.
Yeah, so can you just give us a bit of a background on what you've done in your career and what drives you?
Yeah, sure. So the short of it is I started off in law enforcement locally. I'm from South Carolina, if the accent doesn't give it away. From South Carolina, started locally in the sheriff's office, ended up working my way up to the federal level with the Secret Service, worked with them for a little while. Untimely passing of my father led me back to South Carolina. I worked with Secret Service in Florida. Came back to South Carolina where I went back to work for the local sheriff's office and spent the remaining of my career there before I left to go to the school district in what we call school enforcement unit. Supervised that unit for about 6 years. And in that unit, we housed school resource officers, detection canines, crossing guards, juvenile investigators, family violence investigators, about 70 strong in that unit. And in South Carolina, it really was a unique division because we were solely dedicated to the school district, just like you would have a uniform patrol division or an investigative division. That division solely was for the school district, which was the largest in the state. About 80,000 students and about 116 physical campuses, and then 12,000 full-time employees up to 22,000 if you count part-time and subs. So our division did everything school district. If it was a student, if it was a staff member, personnel issues, anything, our unit was dedicated to the district. That ultimately led into the role that I took in 2018 and led their security department, emergency management department for about 6.5 years, and then ultimately came over to ArmoredOne and been leading their assessment division for a year and a half now.
Awesome. So what drives you every day?
Just knowing that even though there's a ton of products out on the market, and a lot of people love talking about the issue, there's still a lot to be done. There's a lot of fixes that need to happen. And it's concerning because that level, the K-12 space is our next generation, and that's our greatest asset, right? So if we don't protect them and put them in the forefront and do what's necessary to make sure that they have a nurturing and warm environment to learn in and not have to worry about wrongdoing, then got to continue to grind it out.
Yeah, totally. So what are some of the fixes that you're noticing that need to be done in most school districts?
Well, we haven't had a death in a school fire since 1958. And we know that reason or the foundation for that is the building codes and the mandates and such a strong code for fire. Right? You can't build a K-12 building without sprinkler systems, without fire alarms, without pull stations, without all these things mandated through building code for fire. I would really like to see, and what ArmoredOne would like to see, and what the National Council of School Safety Directors would like to see is some of those mandates start filtering over for active shooter. Like there should be mandates for certain building codes for different infrastructure, and us start building some mandates in instead of, oh man, another tragedy hit. Let's try to be reactive and come back and, and renovate and things of that sort.
Totally. So I love that. So what mandates in your ideal world would you like to see every school have? And I think the fire analogy is really, really a great analogy. I used to use that all the time.
Just some hardening, right? So I really think there's a place for making sure that we have impact resistant bollards.
What do you mean by that?
So when you have a front entrance or some major thoroughfare where kids, it could even be like maybe on an athletic field that isn't fenced in, but it's near some sort of roadway. Anywhere a vehicle could make an easy assault path, you put up, impact resistant bollards or any kind of septed level design. It might be a decorative boulder, it might be a planter, it might be a bush or a shrub. but something that would stop a vehicle from being able to, ram into the building or ram into students. I did an assessment yesterday where the drop off and pickup for ADA, right? We got a good ramp up onto the sidewalk, but it leads directly into the school. But from
Right.
the parking lot, if I'm a disgruntled parent, I've come in because little Johnny or little Susie's been bad in class, or I'm not getting along with their teacher, or maybe there's some sort of domestic dispute where I found out where my significant other was, maybe having an affair on campus, whatever the case may be. But I've decided and made an intentional effort that I'm going to do harm. I can drive from the parking lot straight into the front of the school, right? And so
Right.
having some sort of barrier there, and then
Mm-hmm.
moving to the
Have you
main
seen
entrance.
that a lot where like people in their car into students?
Not so much in the K-12 space, but we see it elsewhere, right? And then we
Okay.
see, and the problem is with people who want to do all these things in the K-12 space. I think mental health is a big issue, and that's another topic for another day. But they take these ideologies from everybody else that's gained all this fame, and so I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see it down the road.
Okay.
You look at, was it in Louisiana where the guy drove through the crowd it was at Mardi Gras?
Yeah, that's like
Okay,
the latest one I can
right.
remember,
So
but
those sorts of attacks where I can, have some sort of large assault weapon,
right.
do a lot of harm.
Sure.
And then I would get into, as far as the actual structure or the building components of the building, windowsill heights at certain levels, making sure that secure vestibules are in the main entrance, making sure people can't leave the sidewalks or parking lots and walk directly into a school. Do we have the right camera coverage? Do we have the right access control components? And then once inside the school, how are we building the schools? Are we building collaborative spaces with tons of glass? If so, is there any way that we can build that behind some secured walls where we can get some concealment, some cover when we get into lockdown drills and active shooters and things of that sort?
Cool. All right. So why is active shooter training important for schools?
I think training is important across the board, regardless if it's
Hmm.
active shooter or anything, right? Because we know that people don't rise to the occasion, they fall to the level of their training, right?
Yeah.
So if people don't know what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, and how they're supposed to do it, then now we've got mass chaos. Instead of controlled chaos, it's mass chaos. People don't know what to do.
Right.
So we've got to make sure that we train so when it does happen, we're the most effective and the most efficient that we possibly can be under stress. And we got to make sure that, in our world of security, time is everything. How do we keep bad guy out for the longest period of time while getting good guys there in the shortest amount of time? And we do
Hmm.
that by knowing what we're supposed to do and when we're supposed to do it. So training is probably the most important foundational tool when it comes to emergency preparedness, I think, across the board.
Hmm.
Some of that can be constituted back to accountability. When you go in or I go in and do assessments on schools, and we're looking at culture, and people are using magnetic door holds, or putting magnets over their door latch so the storeroom functions don't work properly, or propping doors, things of that sort.
Hmm.
You know, we got to train and teach and make sure that we understand that that's not the right policy and procedure, or not the right practice. And then if they continue to do it, I tell the administration that I speak with when I go out and do these assessments that some of this is a culture thing and some of this falls on you. And they kind of look at me sideways until I explain, like, there's got to be some accountability. If
Hmm.
you're allowing people to do this, then ultimately it falls on your shoulders if something goes wrong.
Hmm.
They're providing accountability on top of the training really is a good marriage.
Yeah, totally. So what are the key elements of a good active shooter training?
Yeah, I think you can get really, really deep into the weeds. There's a lot of different training methods out there, a lot of different methodologies, and people believe that this one's better than the other. I really just simply tell people, make sure you have a plan, and most of all, make sure you practice the plan. Right?
Hmm.
Make sure you practice the plan. Make sure that your kids know where they're supposed to go, how they're supposed to act. If it's like an Alice model where they're spread out in the classroom, if it's more of an alert model where we find a hard corner and bury down, and you're supposed to be quiet. practice that, making sure that the teacher knows, making sure your substitutes know that when they come in, what they're supposed to do. And the other thing is, in Greenville, what we done, and it really paid dividends for us, was we had local law enforcement or local civil service partners come out, and they assessed us every year, kind of like a third party.
Mm-hmm.
What I have found in training is when you get into those lockdown drills, those active shooter drills, you've got your administration in those schools, whether it's principals or assistant superintendents, whoever shows up, and they're walking around the school checking doors, and checking, making sure that their teachers and faculty and staff and students are doing what they're supposed to do according to policy and procedures for their particular school or district, but they
Mm-hmm.
never practice themselves. So if something happens, the first instinct that they're going to have is, I need to leave my office to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, when in reality, they should be locking down themselves. So we would invite our civil service partners out to kind of do a third party assessment. When I was over security, we kind of have a checklist or a go by, and they would just basically come in. We'd tell the principal, hey, you're in lockdown, and they would conduct the drill, including locking down themselves, and then they would assess us
Mm-hmm.
on the time it took to do that. And then any problem areas, loud classrooms, did anybody not cover their door? Was the door propped? Was it open? Was it unlocked? And then we
Mm-hmm.
would piggyback lockdowns with fire alarms, right? So if I'm a bad guy and I want the most targets to try to do damage, then I'm going to come in and pull the fire alarm or set the fire alarm off and see if anybody evacuates. So we would practice, because our policy was in Greenville, lockdowns trump everything. And they would just give us a little quick assessment, a little quick report. If anybody did poorly, my team would go back and we would debrief with that principal or that admin staff, and then we would do it again until they got it right.
Yeah. So bringing back to the analogy for fire drill mandates, what would the top 3 active shooter drill mandates be for schools?
First, have a plan and have it in emergency response, your
Uh-huh.
emergency response plan. Like, I did an assessment yesterday, and I asked the gentleman who security and emergency management fell under his purview, and I said, hey, do you have an emergency response plan for your active shooter or lockdown
Mm-hmm.
drills? And he said no. Right. So if he doesn't have it, and if it's not written down, how does anybody else in the building know what they're
Right.
supposed to do? So have a plan and make sure it's written down, and make sure people know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that is make sure that you practice that plan more than once a year, sure that you practice it multiple times a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then make sure you have a plan for those in the building that are not normal full-time faculty and staff, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have substitutes or vendors or contractors, you need to make sure that you have a plan for when you vet them and you hire them, they understand the policy and procedure too.
Sure.
Because it's not going to do any good if they say, well, I didn't know what I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Their doors unlocked, their doors are propped, or they're evacuating during a fire alarm, things of that sort.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is making sure that you do have a policy and procedure in place for doors when the educational class is in session, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you have students in your classroom, make sure that you have a policy for that door to be shut and locked, or locked. In Greenville, we had a 2-motion rule, which I don't know that I'm a fan of, but my personal belief is, if you have students in your classroom and you're teaching, that door should be shut and locked from the outside,
Right.
so people can't get in. And then there's been some debate on thumb latches from the inside, whether you can see where the door is locked or isn't locked, or things of that sort.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's, if I'm in the classroom and somebody has a door latch and it says locked, then I know somebody's on the inside. The bad guy probably knows somebody's on the inside too. So yeah, I would think that would be the top.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we prevent bad guys from getting into the schools? I would think that would be number 1, right?
Absolutely. I tell people, we in our world, we try to build castles and not prisons, right?
Mm-hmm.
We still want the environment to be warm and nurturing. We still want the
Mm-hmm.
environment to look inviting.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want it to be abrasive. But I think it starts with really having that plan and layering your technologies, layering your security initiatives to try to move yourself into as much of a proactive posture instead of a
Mm-hmm.
reactive posture, right? So how can I incorporate my security technologies, integrate them all together so they're alerting me real time? Could be through analytics, could be through some sort of security operations center where people are monitoring cameras live. I mean, I know some of this
Mm-hmm.
has funding restraints. But really making sure that you're moving yourself. Like the big thing is, if you have access control, security cameras, things of that sort, making sure that if someone swipes a badge against the card reader and it doesn't recognize, you might want to be alerted. Who's trying to get in my building?
Mm-hmm.
Now we're using that technology as a proactive,
Mm-hmm.
setting your analytics on your cameras for, geofencing and things of that sort. If someone is somewhere they're not supposed to be, make sure you're getting alerts on that. Having
Mm-hmm.
analytics. So if somebody's in the building doing wrongdoings, you can find that person as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then, hardening the school. Do you need some sort of ASTM certified active shooter security film on the first level? Do you need some sort of ASTM
What's
F30?
ASTM?
So ASTM 35 F3561 lays out the guidelines for active shooter glass and film. I'm not talking about safety film or security
Mm-hmm.
film. ASTM lays out the guidelines on which you have to pass rigorous tests in order to receive that certification.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, ASTM outlines is it has to be compromised, which is
Mm-hmm.
it has to be shot with different ammunition types, calibers, and then it has to be hit with a weighted round. And if you can pass their test, then you become active shooter attack certified. Right? There's a difference in that, and then somebody putting in security film. So if the wind blows hard and a tree falls against it, it doesn't shatter and fall into the classroom. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there's been some misnomers, out there with companies saying, "Hey, I've got security film or safety film,"
Mm-hmm.
and that's truly what it is. But it's not active shooter, right? It wouldn't withstand an attack if I was intentionally attacking that glass or that vision kit at that door. It's going to be easily defeated. So ASTM F3561 kind of lays out the guidelines on active
Cool.
shooter attack film and glass.
Cool. So you were previously director of security at Greenville County Schools. Any particular moments that stand out where someone had to take a heroic action, including yourself?
I would say not any one moment. I would
Uh-huh.
say that the thing that I noticed most when I was there that I would say that would kind of go into these lines was we did have a student that was shot and killed in one of our middle schools.
Mm-hmm.
It was a targeted attack. It wasn't an active shooter. I think evidence now tells us that it was probably gang related.
Uh-huh.
But that was one of the schools that we spoke about that we had went out as a team and did an active shooter drill and they didn't do so well, right? And so we debriefed and explained, hey, this is what we're supposed to be doing, and the principal took it upon himself to make sure that he trained his staff and they conducted drills without us because they knew we were
Mm-hmm.
coming back, and he really put a lot of time and effort into making sure that they had got it back on the track. They had got it back to where it needed to be. And so we went out and conducted the drill and the assessment in 1 week, and we were supposed to come back 2 weeks later. Well, the following
Mm-hmm.
week, we had this target attack where a 14-year-old lost his life, and they ended up putting the school in lockdown. And where it had taken them over 8 minutes to clear the hallways and get into lockdown, according to our policy at Greenville, that first week, it took them 42 seconds
Mm-hmm.
when the
Oh.
when the attack happened. And then, you don't ever want a kid to lose his life. You don't ever want a kid to feel like that. He's put himself in a spot or has been put in a spot where he feels like the only way out is to attack some other peer. But
Mm-hmm.
I can say that the policies and procedures and the trainings that we had put in place worked. It worked
Mm-hmm.
really well, and we were able to get to the school, uh, get law enforcement to the school. Law enforcement arrived within like a minute and a half. Our access control policies that we had for our platoon commanders worked. They were able to access the school without us trying to, find them and get them into the school. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and we were able to account for our staff and students, move them off campus, reunify them with parents, and the school turned back over to us. Uh, all in all, within 6 hours.
So yeah, so thank you so much for all of your advice. I just really love the fire analogy, and I really hope we can get there with school active shooters or school violence. Any other final pieces of advice for today? Security directors should be listening to?
I think if a school district doesn't have a person that is solely dedicated to security and emergency management, then they need to. They need to have somebody that's solely dedicated to this cause. Having a finance director or having a technology director where, a superintendent or deputy superintendent have come and said, hey, we've got to take care of security. We're going to give it to you. And that person may not really know what is considered security, safety, emergency management. I think is doing an extreme injustice.
Yeah, totally.
And then I think when you get to safety and security, you have to build a foundational approach, right? It doesn't matter how much money you throw at shiny new objects, how much money you throw at technologies, if you don't have a foundational approach to it, because ultimately it always comes back to people. It always comes back to people. If it fails, it comes back to people. So you need to make sure that you invest most of your time and effort into people. So they trust you, you trust them, relationships, student relationships, and making sure that you build that. So if something happens outside the walls, somebody's, they feel guided to come talk to a trusted adult, and then get back to training, making sure we train, making sure we're doing it right, and then make sure that foundation's in there, and then you can start layering your security technologies and initiatives on top of that.
Yeah, agreed. Well, this has been fantastic, Travis. Thank you so much for chatting with us today, and thanks to our listeners as well. Really appreciate it.
Yep, thank you very much.
Security Heroes is brought to you by Athena Security. To find out more about Athena Security and how we help save lives through our weapon detection solution, visit www.athena-security.com. And then make sure to search for Security Heroes in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Athena, thanks for listening.